The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because my phone was still in my hand when I woke up. I'd fallen asleep on the couch again. Laptop open. A half-eating granola bar on the coffee table. Spreadsheets still loading on the screen. That had been my life for the past 8 months. Work until I couldn't keep my eyes open. Wake up! Do it again. When I saw it was my mother calling that early, I felt a small flicker of warmth. She didn't call often. Usually it was texts asking if I could help out with something, which I'd learned was code for a money transfer. But a 6:47 a.m. call felt different. Personal. Like maybe she was just thinking of me. "Morning, Mom," I said, still half asleep. "Reese." Her voice was clipped. No hello. "Your grandmother's hip replacement got pushed to Thursday. We already booked our tickets for the cruise." I sat up. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Mediterranean cruise. We leave Saturday. Your grandmother's surgery is Thursday now and she's gonna need someone at the facility for the first few days." I waited for the part where she said they were canceling the cruise. The part where she said obviously family comes first. Obviously we're not leaving your 81-year-old grandmother alone after surgery. That part never came. "Okay," I said slowly. "So, you want me to be there for Grandma? You work from home now, don't you? It's not like you have to take time off." I did work from home. I was a senior financial analyst at a logistics firm, and yes, technically my laptop went wherever I went. What my mother didn't understand, or chose not to, was that I worked 60 hours a week from that home. That, working from home, did not mean I was just sitting around available to be deployed. But I said yes. Of course I said yes. Because that's what I did. My name is Reese Calloway. I'm 31 years old. I have a studio apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. A savings account I've been building for 3 years. And a family that has treated that savings account like a shared resource since I got my first real paycheck at 24. It started small. $200 when my brother Evan needed new tires. $500 when my parents' water heater broke. $1,000 when my aunt had a medical bill that was just sitting there. Each one was framed as a loan. None of them were ever paid back. By the time I was 27, I'd stopped calling them loans even in my own head. It was just what I did. I was the one who had a steady job. I was the responsible one. The one without kids yet, without a mortgage, without the kind of obvious financial distress that made a request feel shameless. What I had instead was quiet distress. The kind nobody sees because your rent is paid and you show up to work and you don't complain. My younger brother Evan was what my parents called still figuring himself out. At 28, that figuring involved a series of jobs that lasted 3 to 5 months each, a girlfriend named Tasha who my parents adored, and an apartment my parents helped subsidize. Not with their own money, with mine, routed through them. They never said that directly. It was always "we're a little short this month." Or Evan's having a rough patch. I was the patch. My parents, I'll call them what they were, had retired early. My father at 61 on a pension that covered basics, my mother at 59 on what she described as a well-deserved rest. They owned their home outright, drove reliable cars, and had, over the past 3 years, taken 4 vacations. This Mediterranean cruise would be the 5th. 14 days. 2 ports in Spain, 1 in Italy, 1 in Greece. I knew the itinerary because my mother had sent it to me. Not to share the excitement, I'd learn, but so I'd understand why the dates were non-negotiable. The cruise had cost them $6,800. I know because my father mentioned it proudly the last time I visited. He said they'd saved up for it. I thought about the $2,400 I'd sent over the previous 6 months for various family emergencies and did not say what I was thinking. Grandma Helen's hip replacement went fine. I drove 3 hours to the rehabilitation facility in Asheville, set up in the small family waiting area with my laptop, took calls between check-ins, and sat with her in the evenings when she was alert enough to talk. She was sharp in the way very old people sometimes are. Clear-eyed about things that the younger generation dances around. "Your parents know they're lucky to have you," she said on the second evening. I smiled. "I don't mind." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Minding is allowed, Reese." I didn't know what to say to that, so I refilled her water cup and changed the subject. It was on the fourth day, a Wednesday, that I started feeling wrong. Not sad wrong, not stressed wrong. Physically wrong. My chest felt tight in a way I'd been ignoring for about a week. My vision had gone slightly strange twice in the past 2 days. A brief darkening at the edges that I'd attributed to not eating enough. I'd been skipping lunch to get through my workload. My hands felt colder than usual even in a warm room. I took 2 Advil and got on a 3 p.m. call. By 4:15 I was on the floor. I don't remember falling. I remember being on the call, and then I remember a ceiling I didn't recognize, and someone saying my name very firmly like they'd been saying it for a while. A nurse. The rehabilitation facility had staff on site, and one of them had found me collapsed in the family lounge. My blood pressure had spiked to a level that, the doctor later told me, was a significant event. Not a stroke. Not a heart attack. But a hypertensive crisis. The kind that becomes a stroke if you ignore it, which I had apparently been doing for longer than I knew. They transported me to the main hospital in Asheville. I was admitted. I was told I was not leaving until my numbers stabilized, which could take 2 days or could take 5. Someone on the hospital staff asked for an emergency contact. I gave them my mother's number. She called back 40 minutes later. I was in a hospital gown, IV in my arm. Monitors beeping. Alone in a room that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. "What happened exactly?" she asked. Her voice had the particular quality it got when inconvenient things occurred. A flatness that conveyed that she was listening but also processing how this affected her. I explained. Blood pressure crisis. Admitted. Need to stay a few days. There was a pause. "We're in Barcelona tomorrow," she said. "I know. The shore excursion is already paid for. Both of them." I stared at the ceiling. "Okay. Is it serious? Did they say it's serious?" "Did they say it's serious? They said my blood pressure is dangerously high and I need to be monitored." Another pause. "But you're stable." "Stable as in not currently dying, yes." "Okay." She exhaled. "Keep us updated. And Reese's, can you check on Mom? Make sure they're still taking care of her over there before you get too focused on yourself." I hung up. I lay in the dark for a long time. Outside my window, a parking lot lamp flickered. Somewhere down the hall, a cart wheeled past. No one was coming. The next 4 days were a specific kind of quiet. I don't have language for yet. My coworker Priya texted me within an hour of me sending a brief message to my manager. She asked what hospital, what room, whether she could do anything. My manager, a man named Daniel, who I'd always considered professionally distant, sent flowers. An actual arrangement, delivered by a local florist, with a card that said, "We're holding down the fort. Take the time you need." 2 of my work friends from the Charlotte office group chatted me memes and soup recommendations and asked if I had someone to bring me real food. I didn't, but it didn't feel as bad with them checking in. My brother Evan texted once, "Heard you're in the hospital. That sucks. Feel better." My parents did not call again for 3 days. When my mother finally called, it was to tell me about dinner at a restaurant in Florence that had been absolutely worth every penny, and to ask whether my grandmother's facility was still going smoothly. I told her Grandma Helen was doing fine. A volunteer from the facility's chaplaincy program had been checking in on her since I'd been hospitalized. A stranger. A volunteer. Checking on my grandmother because her granddaughter was in the hospital and no one else was available. My mother said, "That's wonderful, the volunteers there are so dedicated," and moved on. I was discharged on a Sunday. I drove myself back to Charlotte, probably not the smartest decision, but I had no one to ask, and spent 2 days in my apartment doing the slow work of re-entering normal life. I filed for intermittent FMLA with HR. I started a prescription for blood pressure medication. I slept 9 hours a night, which I hadn't done in months, maybe years. My parents came home the following Thursday. They were tan and relaxed and full of stories. My mother brought me a small ceramic dish from a market in Athens. She handed it to me in the parking lot of their house, like a peace offering, and I accepted it the same way. Not because I wanted it, but because the alternative was a conversation I didn't have the energy for yet. It was at dinner that night that Evan brought up the money. He did it casually, the way he always did. Passing the bread, mentioning he and Tasha were looking at apartments, how the good ones were going fast, how the deposit plus first month was a lot to come up with all at once. My father said, "Reese, you've been doing well lately, haven't you?" That was the phrasing. You've been doing well. As if my doing well were a naturally occurring resource they'd noticed and might as well tap. I've been in the hospital, I said. Right, my father said. But work is good? The job is stable? I put my fork down. Dad, I had a hypertensive crisis. I was hospitalized for 5 days. Alone. You said you were stable, my mother said. I was alone. The table went quiet. Evan looked at his plate. Tasha studied her phone. My parents exchanged the look they had, the one that communicated silently that I was being difficult, that I was making things uncomfortable, that whatever I was feeling right now was an overreaction they'd need to manage. We offered to come back early, my mother said. I looked at her. No, you didn't. I said we could look into it. You asked if I was stable, and when I said yes, you went to Florence. She opened her mouth, closed it. My father picked up his fork. We'll talk about this when you're feeling more like yourself, he said. I thought, I am exactly like myself right now. This is the problem. I want to be honest about what I felt in the weeks after that dinner. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was more like a long, slow exhale, the kind you do when you've been holding your breath for so long that you forgot you were doing it. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Kim, and she had the particular gift of asking questions that sounded simple and weren't. In our 3rd session, she asked me to describe what I would lose if I stopped sending money to my family. I thought about it for a long time. They'd struggle, I said. Would they? Evan would have to figure something out. And your parents? I thought about the cruise, the shore excursions, the ceramic dish from Athens. I think they'd manage, I said quietly. Dr. Kim didn't say anything. She just waited. I think I've been afraid that if I stop, they won't love me anymore, I said. And then I think, do they love me now? Or do they love what I provide? That question sat with me for weeks. 3 months after I was discharged, I got an email from a law office in Greensboro. I almost deleted it. It had the look of a formal legal communication, stiff language, a letterhead I didn't recognize. And my first instinct was that it was spam. But the subject line included my full name and a case number, and the body of the email asked me to call at my earliest convenience regarding the estate of my grandfather, Harold Whitmore. My grandfather had died when I was 4. Or so I'd been told. I called. The attorney, a measured woman named Ms. Petrov, explained it carefully. Harold Whitmore had not died when I was 4. He had died 11 weeks ago, at 86, in a retirement community in Greensboro, 45 minutes from where I'd grown up. He had been estranged from my mother, his daughter, for reasons that were complex and documented. He had, however, kept track of his grandchildren. He had, over the past 22 years, made discreet inquiries. He had attended, from a distance, my college graduation. He had been present, unbeknownst to me, at my graduate school hooding ceremony. sitting in the back of the auditorium, leaving before the reception. He had left me, in a will dated 4 years ago, a sum of $214,000 and a handwritten letter. I sat on the floor of my kitchen when she told me this. Not dramatically. My legs just stopped working and the floor was there. "He left a letter?" I said. "Yes, he requested it be delivered personally. Would you be able to come to our office?" I drove to Greensboro on a Tuesday. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten in a careful, slightly shaky cursive. I won't share all of it. Some of it is private in a way I want to keep. But here is what I can tell you. He knew about the money. He'd learned, through channels he didn't fully explain, that I had been financially supporting my mother and brother for years. He had recognized the pattern because, he wrote, my mother had done the same thing to him, had borrowed money from him throughout her 30s repeatedly until he'd finally drawn a hard boundary and she'd cut contact and told everyone he was dead. He had wanted to reach out to me directly. He'd been afraid of disrupting my life, of causing more conflict within a family that was, as he put it, already arranged against your peace of mind. He'd hoped, instead, to leave me something that was simply and entirely mine. Money that had never passed through anyone else's hands. Money with no strings, no history, no obligation attached to it. "You have always deserved people who show up," he wrote near the end. "I am sorry I was not brave enough to be one of them in the ways that counted. This is the only showing up I have left." I read it twice in the attorney's office. I cried in a way I hadn't cried in years. Not the frustrated, exhausted crying I'd done alone in my hospital room, but something that went deeper. Something that felt, strangely, like being recognized. Ms. Petrov handed me a box of tissues without comment. She was good at her job. I didn't tell my mother right away. I needed time to understand what the letter meant before I had to watch someone else decide what it meant. My therapist helped me think through it. Not what to do with the money, that felt secondary, but what to do with the knowing that my grandfather had been 45 minutes away my entire adult life, that he had sat in the back of an auditorium and watched me walk across a stage, that my mother had told everyone he was dead rather than tell the truth, which was that she'd burned a bridge and couldn't find a way back across it. I thought about all the times my mother had described her father. The drinking, the neglect, the things he'd supposedly said and done. Some of it may have been true. I have no way of knowing the full shape of their relationship, and I don't want to flatten him into a saint any more than I want to accept the villain she made him. What I know is that he showed up in the only way he could figure out, when she could not show up for me in an Asheville hospital room. That comparison lived in me for a long time. I told my mother on a Saturday morning. I drove to their house. I sat across from both of them at the kitchen table, the same table where my father had asked if my job was stable 3 months after I'd been hospitalized alone. I said that I had been contacted by an attorney in Greensboro. I said that her father, Harold Whitmore, had died 11 weeks ago. I said that he had left me a letter and money. The silence that followed was not the silence of grief. My mother's face went through several things very quickly. Surprise. Then something guarded. Then a calculation I recognized. I had seen it when she called from Barcelona. "He's been alive this whole time," I said. It wasn't a question. She looked at the table. "It's complicated." "I know it's complicated. I want to hear your version." She gave me a version. It took 20 minutes. It involved old wounds and pride and a fight over money. Always money. And a decision she'd made when she was young that she'd told herself was temporary and then just hadn't reversed. He'd been written out and the story had calcified, and eventually the story was just the truth, or close enough to it. "He sent a letter?" she asked when she was done. "Yes." "What did it say?" "It said he was sorry." She nodded slowly. I watched her process that. I watched her decide not to ask more. I'm not going to keep sending money, I said. She looked up. Not to you, not to Evan, not for apartments or vacations or any other category. I've sent approximately $31,000 over the past 7 years. I did it because I wanted to help and because I didn't know how to say no. I know how now. My father said, "Reese, I'm not angry," I said. And I meant it. I had moved past the place where anger lived and arrived somewhere quieter. I'm not doing this to punish anyone. I'm doing it because I need to be done. My mother's eyes were wet. So that's it. I'll still be your daughter. I'll come for holidays. I'll call. I just won't be the solution to financial problems that aren't mine to solve. She didn't say anything. My father looked at his hands. I drove home. I stopped at a diner on the way and ordered breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee, and I sat by the window and ate it slowly and did not think about anyone's reaction, or anyone's feelings, or whether I had been too harsh or not harsh enough. I just ate my breakfast and watched the parking lot and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like the money in my bank account was mine. That was 8 months ago. I've used some of the inheritance to pay off my student loans, which I'd been carrying for 9 years. I put the rest in an account I opened under only my name, and I have not touched it because I'm still deciding what it means. Not what to spend it on, but what it represents. A man who was afraid to be brave doing the only brave thing he had left. I see Dr. Kim every 2 weeks. I've learned to eat lunch. My blood pressure has been in the normal range for 6 months straight, which my doctor noted with visible relief at my last checkup. My brother Evan got a job. A real one, full-time with benefits. I don't know if my parents cutting off his subsidy had anything to do with it or if the timing was coincidence. I hope he's okay. I mean that. My mother and I talk every couple of weeks. It is not warm in the way I used to wish it would be. It is not cold either. It is honest. Maybe for the first time, she does not ask me for money. I do not ask her why she did what she did. We have arrived at something I don't have a word for. Not forgiveness exactly. Not detachment either. Something in between. Something that might, if we both keep working at it, eventually be something better. I keep my grandfather's letter in the drawer of my nightstand. I've read it maybe a dozen times. There's a line near the beginning that I come back to more than any other. He wrote, "I want you to know that I have been proud of you from a distance, and I am sorry the distance was my fault." I don't read it because it makes me feel better. I read it because it makes me feel real, like someone who existed to someone, in a way that was quiet and imperfect but not nothing. That's enough. For now, that's enough. I've thought a lot about what it actually costs to be the person who never says no. Not in dollars. Though I can tell you that number too, and it's $31,000 over 7 years, which is a real number that I calculated on a real Tuesday night, sitting on my bathroom floor with a bank statement and a level of clarity I hadn't had in a long time. I mean the other cost. The one that doesn't show up anywhere. The cost of shrinking yourself down so other people can feel comfortable. The cost of being so focused on holding everyone else up that you don't notice the ground shifting under your own feet. Until you're on a hospital floor in Asheville and a nurse is saying your name like she's been saying it for a while. I used to think I was being generous. And some of it was genuine. I did want to help. But somewhere along the way, the helping stopped being a choice and started being a condition. Like my place in the family depended on my usefulness to it. Like the moment I stopped producing, I'd stop belonging. That's not generosity. That's fear wearing generosity's clothes. What I understand now, looking back at everything, the $200 for Evan's tires, the $1,000 for someone's medical bill, the cruise that kept sailing while I was alone with an IV in my arm, is that the people around me did not create my situation. I did, not because I was weak or stupid, but because I had never examined the deal I was operating under. I just kept accepting the terms without reading them. And every time I accepted without question, I taught the people around me that the terms were fine. That this was just how things worked. My grandfather Harold made his own version of that mistake in reverse. He burned a bridge and then watched the river from the other side for 22 years, convinced that showing up would make things worse instead of better. He sent money through a will because he couldn't figure out how to send himself. I don't think he was a coward. I think he was someone who ran out of courage at a specific moment and never quite found it again in the way he needed. We are all, in some form, doing the best we can with the version of ourselves we have available on a given day. But here's what his letter taught me, the thing I keep coming back to: the choices we don't make are still choices. Silence is a choice. Staying is a choice. Sending another transfer without asking a single question is a choice. And those choices accumulate into a life, into a version of yourself that you either recognize or don't. I recognize myself now. It took a hospital room and a lawyer and a letter written in shaky cursive by an old man who was afraid to knock on my door. But I recognize myself. If you are the person in your family who always picks up, who always figures it out, who is always fine, I want you to hear this. Being capable is not the same as being responsible for everything. Your competence is not a debt you owe to people who noticed it. Saying no is not cruelty. It is the beginning of honesty. And honesty, I've learned, is the only thing that actually holds.